Every time you try to start something, there's a moment where you stop. Not because you don't know what to do, not because you're not capable. Something else happens. A question appears in the background. What if this goes wrong? And that question feels real. It feels responsible. It feels like you're thinking things through. So you slow down. You wait. You think a little more. You prepare just a bit longer. And from the outside, it makes sense. But here's what most people never stop to ask. If failure is really the problem, why don't you even try in situations where the cost of failing is almost nothing? Sending a message, starting something small, taking a step that no one will even notice. Why is there resistance there too? Because at that level, failure isn't really the problem. And that's where something shifts. Because if you look closely at your behavior, you don't avoid only the things that could go wrong. You also avoid the things that could go right. Opportunities you don't take, paths you don't commit to. Situations where, if they worked, something in your life would have to change. And that's where the real tension is. Not in failure, in success, but not the kind of success people talk about. Not money, not status, not recognition. Something more subtle, the kind of success that forces you to become someone different. Let's slow it down. Imagine this. You take the step you've been avoiding, and it works. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to create momentum. Enough to open a door. What happens next? You can't go back to where you were. You can't tell yourself, this isn't for me anymore. You can't hide behind uncertainty, because now you know. And knowing changes everything. It removes the distance between you and the thing you've been thinking about. It makes it real. And once something becomes real, it demands something from you. Consistency, responsibility, exposure. And that's where the resistance begins. Because staying where you are, even if it's not ideal, is predictable. You know how it feels. You know what to expect. You know how to operate inside it. But stepping into something new, even if it's better, introduces instability. And the mind doesn't like instability. It prefers a familiar discomfort over an unfamiliar possibility. Now here is where it becomes more personal. Because this isn't just about actions. It's about identity. If this works, who do you become? Take that seriously. Because the version of you that exists right now has learned how to survive in the current situation. It knows the rules. It knows the limits. It knows how far it can go without changing anything fundamental. But the moment something works, those rules stop applying. And that creates a gap between who you are and who you would have to be. And that gap is uncomfortable because it requires adaptation. It requires letting go of patterns that have been stable for years. It requires stepping into a version of yourself you haven't tested yet. And the mind resists that. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unknown. Now, here is the part that most people miss. Avoiding failure is easy to admit. It sounds rational, but avoiding success doesn't sound like something you would do, because success is what you say you want. So, how could you be afraid of it? That contradiction is exactly why it stays hidden, because you don't experience it as fear. You experience it as hesitation, as overthinking, as needing more time, as not being ready yet. But if you trace those behaviors back, they all lead to the same point, a moment where something could move forward and you don't let it. And if you ask why, the answer is not always because it might fail. Sometimes it's because it might work. Now let's go deeper, because every decision that moves your life forward also creates a loss. Not a visible one, but a real one. If this works, you lose something. You lose the version of your life where this never happened. You lose alternative paths you kept open. You lose the comfort of not knowing. You lose the ability to say, I could have done it differently. And that loss matters more than people think, because humans don't just chase outcomes, they protect possibilities. And when you act, possibilities collapse into one direction. And that feels restrictive, even if that direction is good. So part of you resists not the action, but the closure that comes with it. Now ask yourself something very precise. What would actually change in your life if this worked? Not in general, specifically. Would your routine change? Would your expectations change? Would how people see you change? Would how you see yourself change? Because that's where the weight is, not in the outcome, in the transformation. Take something simple, You start doing something consistently and it starts working. Now you have to keep going. Now it's not an idea anymore. It's a commitment, and commitment removes flexibility. You can't pretend anymore. You can't go back to, I'm just thinking about it. You are in it. And being in it means you can fail at a higher level. You can be seen more clearly. You can be judged more directly. So the stakes increase, even if the opportunity is good. Now here's where it gets deeper, because success doesn't just change your situation, it changes your identity. If something works, you are no longer the person who is trying. You become the person who is doing. And that sounds like an upgrade, but it also comes with pressure, because now there is something to maintain, something to live up to, something that can be lost. And losing something you already have feels worse than never having it at all. So part of you prefers not to have it, not consciously, but structurally. Now look at your behavior again. Not in theory, in reality. How many times have you been close to something and then slowed down? Not stopped completely, just enough to keep things from fully taking off. You delay slightly, you hesitate slightly, you question things that were already clear, and it doesn't look like sabotage. It looks like caution. It looks like responsibility, but functionally, it creates the same result. Nothing fully happens, because full momentum would force change, and change is what your mind is managing. This is why the pattern is so difficult to see, because from the inside, it looks like wisdom. I just want to be sure. I want to do this right. I don't want to rush. But after a certain point, those are not reasons. They are shields, and they protect you from something specific. The moment where your life stops being theoretical and becomes real. Now here is the key question. Not, what do I want? You already know that. The better question is, what would I have to become if I actually got it? Because that's where the resistance is. Would you have to be more visible? Would you have to take more responsibility? Would you have to stop hiding behind preparation? Would you have to let go of the version of yourself that is still figuring things out? Because that version is safe. The person who is not there yet has protection. They are not fully exposed. They are not fully accountable. They are not fully committed. They can still change direction without consequences. But once you move forward, that protection disappears. Now here is something even more subtle. Staying where you are allows you to preserve a certain identity. The identity of potential. I could do it if I really tried. That sentence feels good because it keeps your options open. It keeps your self-image intact. But the moment you actually try, that identity is tested, and it can break, because now you are not defined by what you could do, but by what you actually do. And that is more precise, but also more uncomfortable. So the mind does something very specific. It keeps you in a state where the possibility exists, but the reality never fully forms, because in that space, you don't lose, but you also don't move. Now, this doesn't mean you should rush into everything. It doesn't mean every hesitation is wrong. It means you need to recognize the difference between thinking that moves you forward and thinking that keeps you in place, between preparation and postponement, between caution and avoidance. So ask yourself something simple. The thing you've been thinking about, if it worked, what would you have to face next? Not in theory, in reality. Would you have to show up differently? Would you have to stop making excuses? Would you have to let go of certain people or habits? Would you have to take ownership of something you've been avoiding? Because that's the real cost of success. Not the work, the change. And once you see that, your behavior starts to make more sense. You're not stuck because you're lazy. You're not stuck because you're incapable. You're not stuck because you don't know what to do. You're stuck because part of you understands exactly what will happen if you do it. And it's not sure it wants that. Now, here is the shift. You don't need to eliminate that fear. You need to make it visible. Because once it's visible, it stops controlling you from the background. You can look at it directly and ask, is this something I'm actually not willing to face? Or is this something I've been avoiding out of habit? Because most of the time, the thing you're avoiding is not impossible. It's just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels heavier than it is. So instead of asking, what if this fails? Ask, what if this works? And I have to live with the consequences of that. And be honest, Because the answer to that question will tell you more about your hesitation than any amount of thinking. Now here is the final point. You don't move forward by removing all uncertainty. That never happens. You move forward by accepting that something will change and deciding you're willing to meet it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's not perfect, even if you don't feel ready. Because readiness is not something you reach before action. It's something that develops because of it. So the next time you feel that hesitation, don't just assume it's fear of failure. Look closer and ask, what am I protecting by staying here? Because sometimes you're not protecting yourself from losing. You're protecting yourself from becoming someone new. And once you see that clearly, the decision becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Because now you're not choosing between success and failure. You're choosing between staying the same or allowing something in your life to actually change. And that's the real decision you've been avoiding all along.